What if the people who claim to love you, never really saw you at all? That question echoed in my head as I stepped through the side gate of my parents' backyard in suburban Austin, Texas. I was exactly 21 minutes late on purpose, not to make a scene, just enough to avoid the suffocating hugs, the tight-lipped smiles, the inevitable first question from my aunt, still single Aisha. The air smelled like grilled shrimp skewers and money-expensive candles from Emily's registry, burning on every table. Twinkle lights lined the fence like they were trying to make the evening sparkle, even if the love in the air felt more filtered than real. Emily, my younger sister, was the star of the night. Her engagement dinner, her moment, her curated perfection in champagne silk and a ring big enough to cast a shadow across the entire patio. I wore black, not out of defiance, just because it was simple, comfortable, non-threatening, and apparently offensive. "Oh, you look cozy," Emily said the moment she floated over. Her voice sugary sweet, but her eyes flicked up and down my outfit like it was something she needed to write a Yelp review about. "You've always had such simple taste." I smiled, tight, practiced, unbothered on the outside. "Good to see you too," I replied, slipping past her toward the table, the one they made sure was full before I arrived. The only open chair was half a seat between Uncle Marcus, who smelled like old cigars and strong opinions, and a planter full of lavender no one had trimmed since spring. I sat. I nodded. I made small talk while sipping still water and watching them toast with sparkling rosé. The table buzzed with news of Emily's new job at the PR firm, of her fiancé's upcoming promotion, of our cousin Deja's pregnancy. Finally, a real family woman, our aunt declared. No one asked me anything, not even a polite "what's new?" They never did. For them, my life was a blurry afterthought. The older sister who never brought a date, the tech girl who moved away and stopped posting updates, the one who always sent expensive gifts but never explained how she could afford them. When Emily turned to her fiancé and announced Aisha's always been so practical, I nearly choked on my water. Her voice danced with fake affection, the kind that cuts sharper than outright cruelty. "She's good at stretching things. I mean, she's still driving that old gray car, aren't you, Aisha?" Laughter, light, just teasing. Except it wasn't. The laughter turned into chuckles around the table. Uncle Marcus leaned in and added, "What is that thing, a 2008 Civic? That car's got more miles than my lawnmower." Emily tilted her head toward her fiancé again, clearly enjoying herself. "She's just very grounded. Never let appearances get to her," she said with a smirk so subtle only someone who grew up with her would recognize it for what it was, war paint. I smiled again, this time softer. My silence was armor. Let them laugh. Let them keep writing their little narrative, the one where I was the frugal older sister with no Instagrammable life and no +1 at holidays. Let them believe I'd settled for less. I wasn't here to prove anything. But fate had other plans. Just as the servers began clearing dinner plates, Emily's fiancé leaned across the table. His tone was casual, curious, almost absent-minded. "Hey, Aisha, this is random," he said, glancing up with a fork still in hand, "but last weekend in St. Bart's, we saw this Gulf Stream on the tarmac. Jet had something like Vance Capital on the side. Then he looked at me, squinting just slightly. Any chance you know anything about that?" And just like that, the entire table froze. Forks paused mid-air. A wine glass clinked and went still. Even the soft jazz drifting from the Bluetooth speaker seemed to hold its breath. My eyes met his. I held his gaze. Then slowly, I smiled. "Yeah," I said, simply taking a slow sip of water. "That's me. No raised voice, no smug tone. Just the truth. And that truth cracked the entire room open like a thunderclap under silk. But I had no idea what was coming next. My sister's smile didn't falter, but something behind her eyes cracked. The silence that followed my quiet confirmation felt like someone had turned the volume knob down on the whole universe. You could almost hear the tension clink against the rim of every untouched wine glass. Across the table, my mother blinked twice slow and calculating, like she was trying to reassemble the version of me she'd always kept in her head. My cousin's fork hovered mid-air, a piece of grilled halibut trembling on the tines. And Emily, my sister, she just stared. Her fiancé was still looking at me, processing, trying to connect dots he didn't even know existed. "You're kidding," Emily said finally. But it wasn't a laugh, it was a demand. I didn't answer, because anything I said would have either sounded like bragging or like damage control. And I wasn't doing either. Not tonight. Her fiancé, bless him, kept going. "I'm pretty sure I read something about Vance Capital acquiring Eastern Freight last year," he said slowly, eyes narrowing. "That was you." The way he said you like he was speaking to a stranger, he suddenly realized he underestimated, sent an unexpected pulse of satisfaction through me. I gave him a half nod. "That deal's old news." Another beat. And then Emily laughed. Not joyfully, not kindly. She laughed the way someone laughs when the spotlight slipped off their face. Too loud, too forced. "She's joking," she said to the table. "Right." The table didn't respond. No one knew how to. The air felt heavier now, like it had thickened with all the things they never bothered to ask, all the assumptions they'd built around my silence, all the stories they told themselves to make sense of why I didn't look successful in the way they understood success. "You've always been independent," my mom said. At last, her voice tight, manufactured. "Didn't want the stress of a big career." Aunt Brenda chimed in, trying to rescue the moment. "Well, it's good to see Aisha's doing something." Something. That was the word they chose. Not impressive, not meaningful, not visionary, just something. I glanced down at my plate. Dessert hadn't even arrived, but the taste in my mouth had already turned sour. This wasn't just skepticism, this was control unraveling, a story undone. A hierarchy carefully constructed over years, suddenly destabilized by a single sentence. They didn't know where to place me anymore. I used to be the quirky older sister, the quiet one, the one they pitied because I never showed off a boyfriend or posted birthday balloon backdrops on Instagram. Now they were realizing I had something they didn't power, I never handed over for approval. Still, I sat. I waited. I watched. And the betrayal began in earnest. Because it wasn't just that they didn't believe me, it's that they did and couldn't handle what that meant. Emily leaned over, her voice low and sticky sweet like it always was when she wanted to control the room without looking like she was. "You could have told us," she said, lips tight. I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" She blinked, didn't answer. But I already knew. Because if I had told them, they would have found a way to dismiss it, to minimize it, to make it about them. They needed me to stay small because that was the role they'd written for me. And now they didn't know how to revise the script. "You always loved keeping secrets," my mother added, not looking at me. "That's not a compliment," I said quietly. And that was when the tension snapped. Uncle Marcus gave a short laugh. "I guess success really doesn't change people. It was meant to sting. It didn't. Not like it used to. Because here's the truth, they weren't upset that I had money or that I built something. They were upset that I didn't need them to do it, that I hadn't begged for support or validation, that I'd created something real, lasting, and kept it all to myself. I looked around the table at the family who had spent years treating me like a cautionary tale. They thought they were safe in the story they'd constructed, that I was lonely, that I'd failed, that I drove an old car because I had no other option. They thought the absence of visible luxury meant the absence of worth. And now the cracks were showing. Because nothing unsettles a family built on appearances like a truth that doesn't match the narrative, and the real betrayal. It wasn't that I'd done well, it was that I had never needed their applause. Still, I hadn't expected how much it would shake them. And the worst part, the night wasn't even over, but the real fallout hadn't begun. Yet, the room didn't explode. It imploded. That's how I remember it. After I confirmed the jet was mine, nobody yelled. No one stormed off. There wasn't even a dramatic wine spill or someone clutching their pearls in theatrical shock. No. The real damage came in the silence. Forks hovered mid-air, waiting for someone else to speak first. Glasses stayed suspended halfway to lips. Eyes flicked between each other, measuring, recalibrating, calculating. In that moment, I wasn't Aisha, the practical sister. I wasn't the woman they'd dismissed with every wedding toast, every family game night, every holiday dinner when they listed everyone's big news and skipped me. I had become something they didn't know how to handle a contradiction. I could see the thoughts forming in real time like a silent group text they were all reading. If she's successful, then why didn't she tell us if she has a jet? Does that mean we were wrong about her? If we were wrong, what else has she kept from us? It hit them like a wave, but for me, it had always been a slow burn. I'd been living with that dissonance for over a decade. They only noticed it now because someone else, someone they respected, had said it out loud. Emily's fiancé leaned back in his chair like he'd stumbled into a war zone he hadn't meant to trigger, his brows furrowed, fingers tapping lightly against his wine glass. "You're the one who built that courier tech startup, right?" he asked cautiously. "It was in Fast Company or Forbes or something." I just nodded. No need to elaborate. He turned to Emily, confused. "You never told me your sister was..." I didn't know Emily snapped her voice sharper than she probably intended. The guests picked up on it. The sharpness. The shift. My mother stiffened. Aunt Brenda pretended to re-butter a roll. Even Uncle Marcus had stopped trying to make a joke of it. I could feel it, all of them rewriting the mental file they had on me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because this was the part they never prepared for me being the one who didn't care anymore. Let me rewind. Let me tell you why this moment mattered. When I was 28, I landed in the hospital with a ruptured appendix. It turned septic. I nearly died. I was unconscious for almost 36 hours and in recovery for 2 weeks after that. Not a single family member called. Not a single one sent a card or asked if I needed help. Do you know who helped me bathe a roommate I barely knew, some guy I found on Craigslist when I couldn't afford anything else in Seattle? He brought me soup. He checked my meds. He texted his own mom to ask if she knew how to help. Meanwhile, my own mother didn't even know or maybe didn't care that I'd almost died. That was the last time I expected anything from them. I stopped sending the holiday group texts. I let birthdays pass without comment. I didn't cut them off. I just quietly let go. And the strange thing, no one noticed. Or maybe they did, but it was easier not to say anything. Easier to let the space grow and pretend it was just distance, not damage. So yes, when my name came up on that jet, it wasn't just a fun fact. It was a rupture. A tiny, unplanned detonation that forced them to see me fully for the first time. And they hated it. Not because I had succeeded, but because they had ignored me while I did. Because I had grown into something they didn't control, didn't shape, didn't even recognize. Emily couldn't stop fidgeting with her napkin. She kept smoothing it out, folding and refolding it like it was some metaphor for the evening she was trying to flatten back into shape. Her fiancé had the decency to stay quiet, but I saw the look in his eyes, admiration mixed with confusion. He was reevaluating everything. "You've always kept things to yourself," my mom finally said. Not an accusation, not quite, but definitely not kind. "I had to," I said softly, and that was the truth. When every version of you is met with eye rolls, corrections, or pity, you start to build your own narrative, one that doesn't require their approval. It's not hiding, it's self-preservation. Dessert arrived, a molten chocolate cake with raspberry coulis Emily had posted about 6 times during the week leading up to the party. It sat untouched in front of me. I wasn't hungry. I was done pretending to be full in a room that had only ever fed me crumbs. "I have an early flight," I said as I stood folding my napkin slowly. I should go. But dessert just came out. My mom said too fast, her voice suddenly bright. I looked her dead in the eye. "Yeah, I know." I walked around the table, passing every face that had refused to ask, refused to listen, refused to believe. No one stopped me. but behind me I heard it. A whisper. Sharp. From a cousin, maybe. She has a jet. It wasn't envy in their voices, it was disorientation, like they'd just realized they'd been living in a house built on assumptions. And now it had no roof. Outside, the air was cooler, quieter. The buzz of cicadas replaced the hum of fake compliments and fragile egos. I walked back to my old Honda, the one they all laughed about. It still ran like a dream, and that night it carried me home without a single hitch. I didn't look back, because something in me had shifted, and I was about to find out what that silence left behind would turn into next. But I wasn't done surprising them yet. I didn't disappear. I just went where no one was looking. After I left the engagement dinner, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call a friend to vent. I just drove, windows down, wind in my hair, the Honda's old speakers crackling with static, and an 80s R&B station I didn't have the energy to change. They thought that was the ending, that me walking away meant I was done. But really, that was the middle. The real beginning started 12 years earlier when I left home at 22 with a duffel bag, $2,000 in savings, and no backup plan. They said I was being dramatic, said I'd come to my senses and move back after a few months. I didn't. I moved to Seattle and stayed in a shared basement with no windows. I made instant noodles in a kettle and washed my clothes at a laundromat that always smelled like bleach and disappointment. I took job after job, temping customer service, digital freelance work nobody cared about. And then one night, hungry and exhausted, I opened my laptop and started coding. Nothing fancy, just a simple tool for independent couriers who needed a way to track and deliver without paying enterprise fees. I didn't even give it a name. I didn't know then that line by line I was building something that would change everything. I didn't become successful the way they imagined. There was no viral moment, no big investor sweep in, no flashy headline or tech conference reveal. There was just grit, sleep-deprived, bone-deep, nobody's coming to save you grit. Some nights I cried into the keyboard. Other nights I drank coffee until 4 a.m. and woke up 2 hours later for my shift at a call center that docked your pay if you were late by even 30 seconds. But I kept building. And eventually, 3 years in a logistics company in Singapore emailed me, asked if I'd ever considered scaling the product. I hadn't, but I did. I spent the next 2 years negotiating deals over Zoom calls while using a $19 webcam. I bootstrapped. I pitched. I took meetings from bathrooms when my roommates were too loud for me to focus. And eventually, it grew. We launched the full platform. We got attention, a seed round, a Series A. By 35, I was CEO of a logistics company with global clients and a valuation that could make anyone's head spin. But I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't post my wins online. I didn't even upgrade my car. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. Still, I kept showing up. Not because I needed their acceptance, but because I wanted to believe something could change. That if I just gave a little more, remembered their birthdays, paid for dinner, sent my niece a laptop for college, they'd look at me differently. They never did. In fact, the more I gave, the more suspicious they became. One year, I quietly offered to help with Emily's student loan debt. She told the entire family I was trying to buy her love. That's when it hit me. It didn't matter how generous I was. In their minds, generosity from me always had strings, because that's how they operated. So I stopped offering, and I started protecting my peace like it was the only thing I had left. And then came the hospital, the appendix, the sepsis, the near-death moment that should have been a wake-up call. But it wasn't. Not for them. Not a single message. Not a single check-in. I could have died, and they wouldn't have known. Or worse, they would have known and still stayed silent. That's the kind of betrayal that doesn't scream. It seeps. It stains. It tells you without ever saying the words, you don't matter enough. And when you survive, that you change. Not into someone colder, but into someone wiser. Someone who no longer bends herself into shapes that people find more convenient to accept. Someone who doesn't explain why she left or what she built or who she had to become along the way. You just show up one day with the receipts in silence. And that's what they saw at the dinner. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the version of themselves that ignored me. And for the first time, they didn't like what they saw. That night, when I got home, I opened my email and saw a message from a venture partner in New York. They wanted to bring me on as a board advisor for a new sustainability logistics initiative. Big money, bigger responsibility. I stared at the offer and realized I didn't need it, but I wanted it. Not to impress anyone, but to keep building something that couldn't be erased, belittled, or boxed into their version of me. Because I hadn't just built a company, I'd built me, and I wasn't done growing yet, but what came next, even I didn't expect it. When the silence broke, it wasn't a reconciliation, it was a scramble. The next morning, my phone buzzed just after 8 a.m., a name I didn't expect, Ethan, Emily's fiancé. A single message, short but loaded. Sorry if that was awkward last night. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Just respect what you've done. A lot. I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I did. Thanks. I'm used to awkward. That was just clarity. He read it instantly, replied with a thumbs up. That was enough. And honestly, it meant more than anything my family had ever said to me. Because it was clean. No subtext, no control. Just a simple acknowledgement from someone who didn't have history to untangle. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Because the validation didn't come from a bloodline. It came from someone who saw me as I was not, as I had been edited to appear. By noon, the rest followed. My cousin Taylor, who hadn't spoken to me since she borrowed money for a business idea, I gently declined, suddenly texted, "Hey stranger, let's catch up soon, coffee on me." Then came Aunt Brenda's message. Thinking about you today. Your mom told me a bit about your company. So impressive. Let's talk sometime. Each ping of my phone felt like a knock on a door I had long since bricked up. But the strangest message came from my mother. Short, clipped, almost accusatory. Why didn't you ever tell us about your business? As if that question didn't carry years of unspoken history inside it. I didn't answer. Not because I was being petty, but because I had nothing left to say. Because that question wasn't curiosity, it was damage control. It was the attempt to reclaim the narrative now that I'd forced it into the light. Had I told them years ago, they would have found a way to minimize it, to twist it, to make it their accomplishment or worse, their burden. They would have said I was exaggerating or acting above everyone, so I stopped sharing. And now they were just too late. Let me be clear, they didn't suddenly become interested in me. They became interested in the story, in the idea of a family member with a jet, with a company, with status they could mention in passing at dinner parties without ever having picked up the phone once when I needed them. They wanted the optics, not the essence. It was never about connection. It was about proximity to a success story they hadn't written, but now wanted to borrow from like it was a designer bag, and I wasn't lending anything out anymore. 2 days later, my assistant confirmed the Gulfstream was fueled and prepped for its next charter. I booked a seat on it for myself, not to escape, to reclaim. I boarded late in the evening, the sun just slipping below the Texas hills, casting amber streaks across the tarmac. I settled into the seat. Nothing flashy, just soft beige leather, a glass of mineral water in hand. No champagne, no selfies, no announcement, just peace. I looked out the window and saw the wing gleaming in the last light, a clean slash of white cutting through dusk, and for the first time in years, I exhaled. They would keep talking. Emily would spin it her way. Maybe I won the lottery. Maybe I dated someone powerful. Maybe I was lying. Didn't matter. Let them guess. Let them chase a version of me they never bothered to understand when it mattered, because the real shift wasn't in the jet, or the business, or the sudden attention. The real shift was in me. I no longer needed to be understood. I sat in that cabin with the hum of altitude rising in my ears and realized this was what freedom felt like. Not proving them wrong, not explaining myself better, just letting go. Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet departure on your terms. And that's exactly what I gave myself. but the final moment of clarity that was still coming. I used to think closure meant saying everything perfectly. Now I know it means walking away without needing to say anything at all. The jet sliced through the clouds above the Gulf, a smooth line between two worlds. One I was leaving and one I finally claimed as mine. I sat with my legs crossed, laptop closed, no music, no distraction, just sky, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel heavy or lonely. It felt clean, like a reset, like I had finally stepped out of their version of me and into my own. Later that night, I lay in bed in my quiet apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline, and memory came crawling back, uninvited but familiar. I remembered being 12, sitting on the back steps during Emily's birthday party, the one just for her friends. I'd helped Mom bake the cake, but when it was served, no one saved me a slice. I remembered prom night, watching from the window as our cousin twirled in the yard, laughing in the golden light. No one had asked if I needed a dress. No one wondered where I was. And I remembered my father before he passed, ruffling my hair with a tired smile and saying, "She's the practical one. The other's the pretty one." I didn't even know those words cut until years later when I realized I'd spent my entire life trying not to be a burden, and still somehow became a disappointment, a shadow even in my own story, until I rewrote it. Line by line. Late night by late night. Failure by failure. Every time I chose not to get bitter. Every time I chose to try again. Every time I stayed quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to protect what I was building from the noise of people who never really cared. That was the power they never saw coming. They were watching for someone loud, someone flashy, someone desperate to impress. But I built my power in silence. And by the time they noticed I didn't need their attention, the next week I received 3 more messages. My mother again. "Let's talk soon. I feel like we've grown apart." My cousin Deja. "Everyone's saying you're some kind of tech genius. Come to brunch next weekend." Even Emily 2 days later. "About the other night. Maybe we should have a real conversation. I'd like that." I didn't reply. Not because I hated them, but because the version of me that needed their invitation no longer existed. That Sunday, while walking through Pike Place Market, I passed a street artist sketching faceless portraits. He looked up and asked if I wanted one done. I said no with a smile, because I'd spent too many years letting other people sketch their versions of me. And finally, I knew who I was. I was the woman who didn't have to explain why she left, or how she built something from nothing, or why she never corrected their assumptions. Because when you know your worth, you don't shout it. You live it. I don't hate my family. I just stopped letting them define me. They'll keep talking, rewriting, reframing. They'll say I changed. They'll say I forgot where I came from. Some will whisper I've become arrogant. Others will insist I was always a little different. Let them. Because I'm no longer answering to their version of me. I live in rooms they'll never enter. I make decisions they'll never understand. And I carry a peace they'll never feel because they're too busy chasing the image. And that night at the engagement dinner, that wasn't revenge. That wasn't a performance. That was truth. Quiet, undeniable truth. Delivered not by me, but by someone they wanted to believe. The irony still makes me smile, because they never would have heard it from me, but from him, from Ethan. It became real, not because it was said louder, but because it was finally in a voice they trusted. And that's okay, because I didn't need the last word. I just needed my own peace, and I found it. So now I leave you with this. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is live fully on your terms, not to prove them wrong, not to win them back, just to be free. Because closure. It's not the big speech. It's not the confrontation. It's the quiet click of the door behind you, not slammed, just shut. It's a one-way ticket on a jet they didn't know you owned. It's saying nothing and letting the silence do the rest. Have you ever faced something like this? Share your story below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because some of us were never lost. We were just building in the dark.